I'll call this meeting of the Parent and Family Engagement Task Force to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Karen Artis, Ted Beasley,
Here.
Erin Bindley, Sarah Berthelot, Charmaine Cassiope, Mary Beth Dickerson, Rep. Kathy Edmondson, Mike Falk, Carly Fuller, Dejanay Jackson,
Here.
Sabrina Mark, Moody, Susan East Nelson,
Here by proxy.
Caroline Romer, Cheryl Surratt, Amanda Shackelford, Ashley Thompson. You have a quorum.
Beck as well. So the first order of business, we need to do some housekeeping from previous meetings and approve the minutes from our meetings in March, July, and September. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes? Ms. Romer? Can I get a second? Ms. Jackson? All right. Anyone opposed? All right. The minutes have been approved. Okay. And just a reminder, just a few housekeeping notes for this meeting. We're live streaming, so do remember to speak into your mic and make sure the green button's on. So at the last meeting, there was some talk about wanting to do a little more research around parent and family engagement. So we wanted to give these few slides just as informational, just to share. This first slide was from our March task force meeting, and it goes over just a few general research points we just wanted to share here again. When parents are involved in their children's schooling, students show higher academic achievement, school engagement and motivation. We have another study from Johns Hopkins that shows a higher percentage of students scoring at or above proficiency on math tests. So when you see engagement specific to math, students do better in math. You also see positive impacts on reading achievement and language comprehensive, expressive language skills, as well as interest in reading and attitudes towards reading. So just in general, these studies just speak to the positive impact of parent engagement, whether it's overall, but then as you get into some specific subjects, and obviously math and reading are two of our priority areas. We also did some additional research. Our comms team pulled some other research. Excuse me. And we sent out before this meeting a more detailed PDF, just listing out some of those studies and some of that research. And then for this meeting, instead of going over all of that, we just kind of wanted to synthesize some of it. So, key finding we found, obviously, effective parent communications improve student outcomes, which we kind of see, basically across the board. Proactive, clear, consistent teacher-to-parent communications has measurable positive impacts on student success. Even something, a brief weekly message has been seen in some studies to increase student engagement. Highlighting areas for improvement. So it's not just celebrating successes, but when you highlight areas for improvement, that's shown to be beneficial to student outcomes. And communication could be cost effective, easily to implement, and focused on actionable insights. Just some additional, just in the same bucket, it talks through multiple touch points, different ways to communicate with the parents, whether it's participation with learning support, decision making, community partnerships can be effective, and again goes back into that impact's proven. It's shown to have a measurable positive impact on student achievement at all grade levels. And talk some about partnerships, which is really important for this group. because that was one of the main asks of this group, was to look at public-private partnerships and how that can impact family engagement. It shows here that those collaborations improve coordination, increase resources, and can strengthen family supports. Talks about the importance of trust. I know we've heard a lot from members of this task force as well as members of the community about the importance of students with disabilities and tailoring support there. This, went through a study that talked about inclusion and the value of trust and those really strong relationships with families that are essential there. And then just talked about making it systemic. Engagement should be intentional, collaborative, and embedded across schools and communities. So without going through that whole sheet, these are just kind of some of the main findings that we found. And really a lot of it really points back to things we kind of went over with this slide in March, just to some of the general positive benefits of family engagement. Research shows that it benefits the student. Any discussion? Yes, Dr. Bindley?
I just have a question. Did you find in your research any information about key moments of time where it's most important for families to engage? And I'm just thinking of my own son who's in high school, who's a junior. We've certainly had the benefit of experiencing some pretty strong communication by schools in the early grades, but it seems as though in the high school years, obviously there's this tension between keeping parents engaged but also supporting students in becoming independent and relying less on parents or family members. But at the same time, they're still minors. Mom and dad are still, providing for them. And if we look at academic achievement data, that's where we often see the biggest plateaus, where we're still struggling and need to provide that last push in the high school years. But yet in many cases, it feels like parents are not being engaged during those critical years anymore. And I'm just wondering if you found anything in your research to address that.
We had I know we did look specifically for some around that. Like we were looking, because we know this group are on special education, and then high school, when we had different departments from the DOE present, when we had our career and college readiness team present, like that's where we got, I think, most of the engagement, even from the group. Like that was a pretty long presentation just because of questions. So there was some. There wasn't a ton. Now, of course, maybe we could have looked harder. But I think that was the reason, specifically that meeting in March. I think that was our second meeting, and just how lively that conversation was with our task force members was kind of the reason. Like, well, let's focus on that high school experience for students, because it is, like, even speaking as a parent, like as your kid moves into those later grades, it's different. It's a different way to engage. They don't have the same student, or they don't have the same teacher, and it's getting them ready for that next stage of life. Yes.
I think just speaking kind of from teaching experience too, the logistical challenges get harder as the kids get older too. I know when I taught at a middle school in Birmingham, we would have parent conferences regularly throughout the year because we had a planning time and a meeting/conference time, and so we had time built into the school day to meet with parents. But that meant that the 4 core teachers met with that parent. And so considering that together we had 150 students, there wasn't time always to schedule an hour parent conference with every parent during the year where they could, because sometimes they would meet and they would say, well, I really just have questions for math teacher or social studies teacher or whatever. But, we all had to be in there because you didn't know, like you wanted to be accessible to them. And so, thinking about the other middle school that I taught at here in Louisiana, didn't do that just because of logistics, but they encouraged parent conference. And we had time built in the day there too that we could do that. So we focused there more on, if in our team meeting we would say we're seeing issues with this student, we would kind of compare notes across teachers, and then we would schedule a conference with that teacher and meet with the 4 of us too. And so we were trying to, I guess, triage it a little bit, who we need to have some in-person time with. Versus my kids in elementary school, we had a conference day. And so they had just me as a teacher or me and a partner teacher as a teacher. You could fit 25 to 40 parent conferences, 15-minute slots into a day, and at least have a face-to-face touch base with everybody. It was just easier to schedule. And then two, there was, a lot of the teachers at middle school felt strongly about making sure that the kids could be independent and be able to manage their own work and project manage and keep up with their own success, because we would tell the parents, when you get into high school, you're probably not going to have an invitation to come to a parent conference, just because those teachers, it gets, as you specialize in a content area, you have more people whose schedules you have to coordinate to be able to schedule that face-to-face time. And so you want the students to be more independent as they get older, but then what about when they're not? When we had students who had trouble with that elementary to middle school transition, and they were struggling just to keep up with all the expectations in, 4, 6, 7 different classes, we would tell the parents, here are some organizational strategies you can work on. Here's some things we're seeing. Maybe we need to sign your, students' agenda every day for a little while, just to make sure they're writing down their homework assignments, and you see what the homework assignments are, and let's do that for 9 weeks and then see if we could not do that. We really worked hard to try to, wean them off of that more intense support, because we knew it just wasn't guaranteed as they would get older, and it was a challenge to schedule it. And so I'm thinking too, as my kids have gone through high school, I appreciated whenever we would get good school level communication about the resources that were there for us. They would say, if your student's having trouble navigating class expectations, you can get their Google Classroom login so you can see all the assignments and the homework and all that if you need to give them some extra support. Or they would say, be sure you're checking your child's Power School once a week to know what their grades are. You might not get communication volunteered from the teacher, but if you have questions about a grade or an assignment, you can reach out and set up some time. And then if you needed time with the teacher, you would schedule it, and it would be just with that one teacher. There wasn't, I'm going to schedule a conference, get all their teachers in there. I'm going to schedule a conference with their math teacher or with their English teacher. But I appreciated whenever, because that was something I didn't know when my son first got to high school, was, how do I know anything? Because we're not getting letters home. Or, like you just, and you want them to be independent enough to self-manage, but what if they're not? But I appreciated when the school told me, okay, here's what you can do. And if you're having issues, here's what you can do. That was something that came school level instead of teacher level that was helpful to me.
Caroline with the Louisiana Charter School Association. I have a son that's in high school. I've been blessed that since he was in pre-K, he's rolled right along. I've not been required to do a whole lot with him. But with that being said, I have been surprised at times with friends and their high school kids, when my friends don't know certain things like dual enrollment things or whatever. Tell me, Ashley, like, what are laws or policies related to, like, I'll give a good example, high school counselor. Maybe a high school counselor has spoken to my son before. I don't know. So I'd be curious on those things as we're pushing a new accountability system that really focuses on college. Some will go to a job. I'd like to know more about what's required of districts and schools related to talking to parents.
So that individual graduation plan process, those conversations should start in middle school. And ideally at that point, students have had exposure to career options in middle school. They know some different directions they might choose. And so then in 8th grade, when you make that individual graduation plan, you're saying, here's what I'm thinking for right now. I know I'm 12, 13. I have no idea what I'm going to do for the next 50 years, but here's what it looks like today. And you make this plan. You're supposed to make it with your counselor, parents sign off. I think that sometimes, and this is one thing that I know our team has been doing some work on, improving their counselor guidance and improving the professional development that our counselors receive at their institutes and trainings. Because sometimes I think that becomes more of a box to check instead of a meaningful process like it should be, where students can find out about things like course choice or dual enrollment opportunities, or STEM pathways that they might want to pursue. And if you put 300 kids in a room with 2 counselors and say, here's your course schedule that we recommend, like, email your parents this thing to sign off on, you're just losing something, as opposed to if a counselor sits down with a student and says, hey, your grades are this, your interests are this, what are you thinking about doing after high school? Oh, you want to go to college out of state, you're going to need to do this. You want to go to, trade school in state, you're going to, whatever the thing is, just help them think through and understand those different options. It's supposed to be more of a conversation. I've also heard a couple of districts who are looking at like bifurcating those counselor duties a little bit, like when they can pull in some people who don't necessarily have the master's in counseling to do some of the career counseling, like task, then it helps free up that school counselor who does have that master's in counseling to do those specialty activities that you really want somebody with that level of training to do. But it gives it gives you more adults who can sit down with a child and they are trained to be able to say, here are your different options, what are you interested in, be able to make time for that one-on-one conversation. So that's been interesting too, to hear from a couple of districts that are looking at how can I, I guess separate out the different duties that my school counselor was doing and provide that person some support to come alongside and be able to multiply their efforts so that kids can get more one-on-one conversations. That's been interesting too.
I'd like to speak to my experience as a mother of three in East Baton Rouge Parish. I'm Mary Juneau. I'm here for Susan East Nelson. We do sign individual graduation plans starting in middle school. Every year those come home with a lot of details. And in addition, our schools tend to have a good parent organization that partners with the school. So the school itself does send out multiple text messages. There's an app to get almost daily announcements about various issues concerning students. In the high school, there are grade level groups one can join as a parent. So some of the things we've done here in EBR is have the guidance counselors come and give a specific talk, whether it's on accelerated reader that might be required for freshmen, and then college planning open to everyone, what is FAFSA? And then of course the types of accelerated courses like our advanced placement. How are those significantly different from dual enrollment? Where the school might lack time, I find that a lot of parents will go do the research and present that information in a public forum to parents. So I think there's not only the use of technology to reach out and also paper documents that we have to sign regularly, and events like open houses and access to guidance counselors and teachers. There's also the support of parents, and I think that's really crucial to be organized and responsive to the questions that parents have.
So as we sit in rooms lately, we talk a lot about literacy. We're hearing a lot about truancy. I missed our first meeting, so maybe truancy came up, but that's going through my mind is what are any best practices, and maybe someone like Superintendent Falk may know around communications. I'm thinking as a group, if there are certain key priorities that the state's working on, how does this task force feed or partnerships and dealing with that? I also was thinking about literacy, and Ms. Jackson may know more about this than I do, but I was thinking about how often we say a child's reading on grade level or not. I know as a parent, I'm not sure I would know what grade level sounds like, for example, in the first grade. So I don't know if the department has amongst their tools, maybe like a video of what it sounds like a child reading on grade level. Maybe that exists.
Caroline, you must have been on our app.
Oh, so
And that's why it's important for those partnerships, because these resources exist, and that's in all of what you all are talking about, we've brought up a number of times in our meetings, especially that high school engagement and the misconception around what family engagement looks like and what it should look like. And there's research out of Harvard that does talk about adolescent family engagement. So that's some information and research that we definitely should lean into. But that very reason around not knowing, assuming parents know the lingo and know the standards and that sort of thing is where we sort of get caught up. And while I appreciate Mary Juneau's experience, that's not the majority of parents' experiences. And as a parent of a child in EBR parish, I don't have that experience. And so we want to make sure that we have consistency and access for all families at all schools across all districts in the state. But I got really frustrated at the high school level too. I have one like Caroline who my kid's going to go and breeze through everything, and I never get a call because I never had, he never is late for anything or kind of does his own thing. Then
Every now and then, but he won't.
yeah. And then, you know, I sign something or whatever and put it back in his book bag and he keeps it pushing. But then I have the other end where I have to have daily communication and support. But because I am specialized in, you know, the type of supports that I need, that does not mean that the school climate and culture has really robust family engagement. So I think leaning into that is really important. One of the things that you asked, Caroline, is like what the priority areas are, and truancy was one of the things we talked about. Truancy and high school engagement. When the department had several agencies come to speak to us, we were blown away by the options in high school that I, for one, didn't even know what were options. And so that's one of the things that I hope that is a priority area for this group is high school special education, and those, you know, specialized groups.
So I would add, have you had parents go to the principals and say, this is some basics of what we need? Like, what can we do to facilitate that? So it is at all the schools. If our child doesn't attend the school, what can we do to see that there are best practices in place for communication?
No, that's been done. I think the issue is schools don't have clear guidance on what that looks like, and they often don't know what they're required to do, especially like your special education advisory councils, your parent advisory councils, those sort of things, and having that be the vessel. And if you have PTO, PTA, how do we utilize that? So all of those things are you know, avenues that we talked about to support what family engagement can look like. And then, of course, we have a statewide family engagement center that has been doing the work across the state for our schools so that they can build strong connection.
And one of the things that we find is that schools don't genuinely understand the difference between family involvement and family engagement. So regardless of the age of the child, parents should always be engaged so that they're knowledgeable and they can truly collaborate with their school about the decisions that their children are going to have to make that will impact them all the way through graduation. And to answer one of your original questions, Aaron, research shows that family engagement should start early when children are birth to 5 so that you begin to inform and have families to develop the habits of asking questions and being involved. And it should remain consistent across that child's educational career, because then parents become more empowered and they know what kinds of questions to ask and how they should be interacting and engaging with schools in order to best support their children.
What I think I'm hearing is that piece of the toolkit and creating that toolkit where they can plug and play the pieces that are necessary. The partnerships and collaboration, knowing what exists and what's already out there, and how can we provide these to the best of our ability. I guess I'm jumping ahead looking at the focus areas and recommendations there, but I feel that these are moving in the right direction, especially given this conversation that we're having now with the community, especially communication piece, and how it should be communicated to the public and to parents as well.
Dr. Mindley?
One more point on high schools, and I think we beat this horse to death almost. Very important topics, though. So I think it was almost 2 weeks ago, there was a House Education Committee meeting in New Orleans that talked about pathways, particularly leading to jobs and healthcare, but it turned into a conversation about workplace readiness overall and supporting students. And I requested some data from the department that I got back last week, which I thought was very interesting. And I think this speaks to truancy. This speaks to families being truly engaged versus just getting a form in, home that they sign and return. When we talk about really preparing our students and equipping them with the knowledge and skills to pursue opportunity, and certainly there are multiple pathways to do that. We know that a pathway to work and exposure to careers and training and development of workplace skills in high school is so important. Yet we still have school districts. I'm looking at Orleans Parish. 2.4% of students graduate on the career diploma. EBR, 8.7%. I have a really hard time believing that that is consistent with, you know, students and families being truly informed and consciously making that decision. I could be wrong, but I'm very skeptical. And I think just that alone tells me that we have some mismatch between the information that we are putting out there versus really having conversations with families and students about options so that they can make decisions to support their future. I mean, these are students, if we're assuming that nearly 100% of our students all want to go to a four-year university and are actually going to do it after they graduate, that's not real. We know that that percentage of students are not going on to pursue a bachelor's degree, but we're allowing them to walk across the stage knowing that we've not really set them up for success. And that starts with just having really intentional conversations with them and their families about options and opportunities. So I don't know what more can be done across a system of so many students, so many counselors, so many families to make sure that this is not just a kind of superficial transactional process of signing a piece of paper. How do we make sure that real conversations and information is being provided so that they can make an informed choice? And I think if we look at, again, this is just one data point, but we see other districts that have very different data, and that suggests to me conversations are happening. Families are getting the information they need to work with their students to make these decisions. So I would just encourage you to take a look at that, because that data point alone just really speaks volumes to me that we have a lot of work left to do in that area.
I just wanted to say, Caroline started this by asking about, what are the laws? And there are lots of laws that require the individual graduation plans, the orientations with students and parents, and, and they also vary. I mean, because the laws, traditionally they, impact traditional public schools, but not always charter schools, and definitely not always non-public. So, depending on where children are going, that impacts where those laws, but there's also, like Aaron's saying, there's also the way that those laws are implemented can vary greatly too. But as far as laws, there are tons of laws on these issues on the books that are very specific, that, outline exactly what has to be done, when it has to be done, and who has to do it.
Any other great conversation, and some of it did, I think, as Shackelford mentioned, kind of go into some of the recommendations as well.
Ted,
Mr. Falk?
Ted, one point I'd like to make. I think the key issue across the board is communication mechanisms. What are school systems doing to communicate to parents? And it doesn't matter what grade level. It's from lower elementary all the way to high school. But there are school systems that are doing, and as Aaron pointed out, that the numbers there reflect that they're doing something right. So what are these people doing that is right, that we can use as an example? We have laws, we have regulations that require this. So what are the things being done where success is being accomplished? Not only with individual graduation plans, being prepared when they leave high school, truancy. We keep talking about truancy and attendance at school and stuff. What are people doing to address these key issues, and then have a menu of pilot programs that are in place for people to look and then reach out to one another. Just like you and I talked earlier, you have the EBRs, the Orleans, and then you have the Tensall parishes. You have the rural outline. You have people that have access to the internet. You have districts with websites. Some of them are very good, some of them are not very good. So find out success stories and share with others, and you'll find that more people will begin interacting with one another and seeing what's being done.
Yeah, I think those best practices are very important. It is, as a communications person too, it's always tough because then it's like you put things out on your channels, the channels you have, and then it's also, okay, how do we get those parents to engage? And even going like to the CTE issue, that it's like we also need to work on like that stigma that exists too around it, where some people think it's a secondary path, and it's not. These are amazing options for kids.
A lot of times communication platforms are purchased with Title I funds, and sometimes certain platforms work better than others, or they're more user-friendly. And then some schools don't have Title I funds to use to purchase those platforms. So that piece of finding out what communication avenue is best for each population is a difficult navigation, actually.
And I think this is why it's so important that we not just consider what we do on the front end, all the ways that we can exercise effective communication practices. That's obviously where it starts, but that's not where it's finished. If we just put things out there and we just assume magic is going to happen, and we don't look at the outcomes, the data, whether it's how many students are graduating on which type of career pathway or diploma pathway or student achievement data, that's what tells us if our communication strategies are effective. We can't have one without the other. And so communication requires constant evaluation to know whether our communication is effective or not. And if it's not, if we're not seeing that it's making a difference, then something needs to be improved.
My intention in sharing my experience, and I know it's somewhat unique, is to offer the example of some best practices. And maybe what's needed is to have, to maybe increase the Office of Engagement and have people who actually can go into the schools, not to act like, know-it-alls, but to offer that legitimate support in setting up some of these practices. Like maybe more funding could be directed in developing parent organizations and helping principals get these communication platforms and then training on how to use them.
As we move into our focus areas, is there any plan in order to bring in these data pieces or to look into best practices of what works in different areas with different populations before creating the resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the, in kind of getting ahead to the recommendations, just as I looked at them from my perspective at the LDOE, though that was one of the areas I was, okay, that's something we need to work on, are these best practices of family engagement. Where is it working? And then sharing those examples out. Yeah.
I think from our end, at least, some of it will come through different divisions. So, for example, our attendance team has been working with school districts who, in law, there's required to be a parent conference after the third unexcused absence. So our attendance team has been working with some school districts who maybe weren't implementing that very effectively to help them understand, here's what the requirement is, what are you doing right now? How can we do that better and more effectively? Because that, engaging with the parents early on before the students truant can help address the issues, maybe connect them to some community resources that might be helpful, and then, get to where that student doesn't end up truant. So, but that's coming from our attendance team, focused on helping school districts understand how they can communicate with parents specific to that area. And then you've got our, in our diverse learners team, our division of English learners, they've worked on making sure that we have parent resources available in a couple of different languages so that you can help your parents of English learners who probably are English learners themselves be able to understand what their kiddos are learning in class. So, and that's coming through that division. So from our end, it comes from each different division, thinking about how can we support schools in connecting with families. From the school level, if I'm if you're a school board or a district leader, the way you think about that might be a little bit different. But from our end, it's coming from each of our different offices, thinking about how can we support schools in getting the outcome that we're trying to get.
We did have one public comment card. Mr. Wilmer, was it this item you wanted to speak on? Okay, you can, if you want to come in, if you want to, you can take this chair right here. Just turn your microphone on.
Good morning. So as I sit here and I listen to you all share your experiences, your strengths, and your hopes, it sounds great, sounds good. Yet what this doctor said earlier makes a whole lot of sense. Having someone there doing the footwork on the ground. We can come up with so many good ideas, yet if you don't have anyone there making sure that they're being taken care of, we're twiddling our fingers. I've gone to ESS meetings since the last meeting you all had. I went to a meeting where they had this committee that the state formed to make sure all the schools were following the codes, for lack of better words, dotting all their I's, crossing all their T's. And these different meetings that I've went to, I've heard a lot of good stuff and I've seen progress being done. Yet I'm gonna go back to the last meeting, what I shared. PTA, and I wanna speak to you afterwards, is the footwork, the ground where it starts at. Because if you get a PTA meeting or a group at each school started, they can communicate with the parents. And after that, if PTA can't handle it, then Dr. Lawrence Wells group can help. Dr. Jackson's group can help. Dr. Marsh group can help. Dr. Bell's group can help. Because all these different entities are important. They are. And they all work, yet we have to work and coincide with each other. This group can't be better than this one, or this one is doing more. If we work together, it will work. And when I went to these different meetings that I just shared with in East Baton Rouge Parish School System, my daughter, who is in the fifth, is in kindergarten, who's 5, who's artistic, and she's on the high end of autism. Her first report card was 9 A's and 1 B. And she goes to 3 different classes outside of the ESS class, which is the regular classroom setting, and she had 2 A's and 1 B. So something is working. Something is getting across. Yet if we start once again with the PTA, I feel like we can take this state to a whole nother level. And even though I'm just saying that, I'm gonna get involved. I'm gonna be a part. I had 2 parents that were supposed to be here who wanted to talk to you, Ms. Beth, because at my daughter's school, her principal wants me to be the head over the PTA at her school, but I told her I couldn't do it because my hands are scattered, but I would help her find someone. And another parent who wants to start one at her child's school. I'm advocating. I'm sharing what you all are sharing because I want to see things do better. And that's what I want to share.
And I asked, what would the recommendations be to get a PTA started and maybe a more apathetic parent group? If anyone had any suggestions, because we do want parents to be involved, but sometimes they're stretched too thin, or we can't get a PTA started.
If we can get someone to advocate, like I'm willing to, I spoke with my mother about this, and she's a God-fearing woman. I am as well. And I don't want to be nowhere saying something that don't make sense. I don't want to be doing nothing that doesn't make sense. And I've been thinking long and hard about it. And I'm almost to the point to where I want to tell Miss Beth, I would be the one to go to every school in Louisiana if the funds came available to be able to start a PTA, because that's the ground that I see from my experiences, my strengths, and my hopes, that if you get the PTA started, which is in the school, they can address and help the students. And if they can't handle what needs to be handled, the names that I mentioned earlier, like Ms. Jackson, Ms. Dr. Well, those other entities can step in and get the job accomplished. And this is where it starts.
Thanks, Mr. Homer. I have one more comment card. Ms. Reed, you wanted to speak on this item as well?
It's so hard to follow him because he's like so much more professional. Okay, so I have some cards here as making notes because I came unprepared. I can attest to the communication as far as with Denham Springs High School. Even the counselor has sent an Google Classroom. There are certain codes you can get into. The counselor even has that. So I get text messages about, now this is speaking from the special education side of things. But I get scheduling, I get homework, I get it in the form of text and email, whether it come in at 2 o'clock in the morning. Thankfully, I'm sleeping, but I still get them. So that I can attest to as far as if y'all are looking at communication. Sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, but it's still there. I can go back and look at the text message. Like this week, last week they were doing school colors wars and things because of HOCO, whatever that's called, the homecoming. So my son actually, for the first time in his school career, did not wear his uniform to school. He wore black clothing, and I was so proud of him. Okay, he's very routine. High school communication. I do find that sometimes, like we had last year, the communication with some of the teachers is a teacher problem. I had one teacher who was late on grading papers, and he wasn't very good at communicating the homeworks that needed to be done, or in putting the homework or work into the Google Classrooms. That is also important that teachers keep up with that for parents that are involved. Okay, I'm going to speak good on the teachers for once. Because I've had a lot of issues with the school system. Teachers are expected to do way too much stuff. It is so overwhelming to hear that the teachers, even texting after school hours or saying, oh, I graded papers till I went to bed. Like, that's way too much. Even the workload for the students. Sometimes my student will come home, and last year he would do homework 2 to 3 hours after school. He's on a different level. So yeah, I do want to just talk on that the workload, that I think y'all do too much. And I know y'all have a lot to fit into your schedules, but calm down, because the students can't handle it. It's pressure on the teachers, it's pressure on the students, it's pressure on the families. And we're expected to keep up with all of this stuff that y'all are expected to keep up with as well. Also, I wanted to talk to, I don't know her name. Excuse me. Hi. Miss Caroline. Hi, I'm Sam. I just wanted to let you know, what you're probably already aware of, that all the meetings have been posted on YouTube. So I've been able to go back and look at our first meeting as well, because I've been to every meeting. So this has been so much fun. But yeah, if there's anything you need to catch up on, it's really, it's an awesome privilege to be able to go look at. Let's see, family engagement. Like he was talking about the PTA, I would more so trust another parent than I would the school system. Obviously, we've had issues. I'm not into the parents that suck up to the school system. I find myself a little bit different, a little more outspoken. I'm not gonna sit down and shut up like a lot of the parents would. So I definitely lean more towards parents. One thing I was thinking while I was sitting back there was that, I don't know if y'all go on Facebook and read some of these comments, but there's a lot of concerns that parents do say. Now, there's some idiotic people out there that make comments, but there's a general.
Ms. Reed, Not, we do limit public comment to 3 minutes. I
sorry.
gave you an extra minute, but if you want to go ahead and wrap it up, you can.
Okay, yeah, I'll wrap it up with offer more trades. Offer more trades. I know you have engineering and stuff like that, 4-H, but
Mhm.
like, do more of your blue collared work. I don't see a
Mhm.
lot of that. Like, I went to a program called JCP. They had painting, welding, which I was gonna do. My mom forced me to do office skills. But if y'all don't expect them to go to a 4-year college, give them something else to do. And so a lot of your kids will do that. I'm so sorry I took so long.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item, which is the Parent and Family Engagement Task Force report. This is our last meeting on the calendar. Just a quick overview, final report was created in response to House Resolution 239 of 2024. We put the report together based on research, based on the presentations that were given at our meetings, based on discussions from members, based on discussions from the public as well. There's a typo here. There were originally 10 final areas of focus. Mrs. Jackson made a good recommendation to kind of streamline those. So they've been streamlined into 5 focus areas with recommendations in each. It's broken down into an executive summary. There's an overview. We have details as far as task force meetings and membership. We included a section that went over some current LDOE initiatives. It's not all encompassing, but it does give an overview of some of the ongoing efforts. The main bulk of this, though, are the focus areas and those recommendations. So here is a look at those 5 recommendation areas. They're broken down into partnerships and collaboration. Again, one of the areas called out in the resolution was specific to public-private partnerships, communication, clarity, and access. We have support and capacity building. A lot of that directed at support and capacity building training for educators, elevating family voice, involvement of parents, and then a little bit around financial and policy alignment. So what I thought would be helpful here is I have a slide, at least one slide for each bucket, and we're just gonna go through them. I'm not supposed to just read what's on the slides. They teach you not to do that in communications, but I'm just gonna read what's on the slides just because this is what is in the recommendations. And just kind of thoughts around how it was put together, try to base it on what was shared at these meetings, on feedback that was given. There were some areas that we called out specifically just because it came up a lot in these meetings. Special education is one of those areas. High school planning is one of those areas. I think you'll probably see some literacy and some reading. And we also had members bring up really good topics and subjects as well. I think Ms. Moody had shared something around foster care and students there. Mr. Falk and Mr. Morrison brought up something around surveying and getting parent input. And I know other people brought up some specific areas as well. And we also talked about continuation of a formal group or inclusion in other groups of parents, of some type of council, or inclusion in other groups. So we tried to, in some of those areas, we tried to just make these a little broad so that it allows for either you or for a lawmaker to leverage some of these recommendations to fit into some of those areas. Because I kind of felt like if we dug into every detail, it's like, well, where do you stop? So that was kind of the thinking there. Dr. Bindley?
As you go through these, could you specify to the degree that you can who should do these things? Because it's not always clear if these are things that you are suggesting that the department should do or should school systems do. Should, just give us a little sense of.
I can say that kind of in putting them together, there wasn't that level of I don't want to say detail, but that level of like, hey, this person should do this. There are some I can share that I've already said, okay, we need to do this at the LDOE or, in comms. Kind of the thought around some of that was, as a task force, different organizations or different agencies that are represented would, if they see something they want to move on, they would be able to do that. And then if there are any lawmakers that wanted to utilize any of these for legislation or policy, they would be able to do that.
Something just popped, I don't know if this is working. Something popped in my head. You all do your teacher summit.
Yes.
I've not, I've gone a few years ago. It seems to just get bigger and bigger, like what, 7,000 teachers? Do any of your sessions include parent engagement, like the training that could be, again, low-hanging fruit, lots of teachers in one place, and maybe a series or something?
Yeah. They'll have some that are focused on parent and family engagement, but that would be also a good place for us to.
In the work we do, sadly, politics are involved, and we poll a lot. And one of the things that we've learned through our polling is that the number one trusted relationship that a parent has with their school is the teacher. And the different studies I've read, just briefly, Harvard studies, there's tons of them. It all focuses on that relationship with the teacher. A parent responds better to someone they know. And so again, maybe that's just an opportunity when you have all those folks corralled to share some best practices.
That's a good, thank you for sharing that.
We're able to roll out the truancy ideas this year and also start the solution summit, which was all around the truancy issue.
Yeah, and I know they'll definitely have more attendance sessions as well. And then also, I think this year at Summit, the Fast Forward, the CTE conference is being kind of taken into Teacher Leader Summit as well, and that's other opportunities there for career. All right, so we'll start with partnership and collaboration. So these recommendations in this bucket seek to expand and strengthen partnership between schools, families, communities, and the private sector. So 4 recommendations here. Support the development of a statewide repository of business and organizations interested in partnering with schools and encouraging two-way communication. Encourage two-way collaboration between schools seeking support and community partners seeking to engage. Collaborate with business associations to expand outreach and visibility of opportunities to support schools. Engage with existing parent organizations such as PTA and PTO to elevate parent voice beyond just fundraising. Speaking to Dr. Bindley's question, I know that, one of the things I'm thinking through after this is I need to connect with Brian Davis on our team for A and probably a little bit of B and C. I know he's been working with businesses to put together over 1,000 internship opportunities for school systems to utilize. So, connecting with him to see, what would a repository like this look like for businesses that want to be engaged. Another recommendation we've had from the business community when we launched our new website, when we have our audience pages now, like there's so much stuff on our website. I don't know if it'll ever be easy to find stuff, but we tried to break down little sub-audience home pages. So we have one for families, for educators, for leaders. And there was a recommendation, hey, can we get one of those for businesses, for business and industry that are in our state that want to know how our state operates as far as education, but also how could I help some of my schools? So those are some of my thoughts from the LDOE on these, but are there any?
I'm thinking maybe even, because the way I picture that sometimes is the way we put out that guidance for developing work-based learning, and we created a school district side of it and then a business side of it so that both sides could understand from their perspective, here's what this is, and then here's what you would need to do to engage or set this up. And so I pictured this kind of a similar way, except I'm thinking if it's going to have at the end of it a list of the businesses or organizations that would be interested in partnering with schools, like how do we get to that list? And so I think Brian's a great idea. And then I'm wondering too, if we send to y'all whenever it gets time to put that together, hey, can you share this with your organizations? If you've got a business, an association, an organization that would be interested in partnering with schools, fill out this form or whatever. And then that way we could populate that list back there with some organizations, or is that something that y'all would be willing to support with too? Because that's something too, like we don't have a communication mechanism directly with, every organization and nonprofit and business in the state.
Is it possible that these lists could even be made into posters and put at grocery stores, libraries, the mall perhaps, to increase visibility? Like run it like a full ad campaign? Just a thought.
May I ask a question, just for clarification? This is family and parent engagement, and I'm just trying to see, when we talk about this business engagement, what are you foreseeing, like business engagement to increase parent and family engagement? Like I'm just not bridging those, so.
Sure. I think it could, and Ted may want to offer more of this too. I think it's going to look different depending on the application. And so, we've engaged with all these businesses to develop work-based learning opportunities, and that's amazing. So now we've been talking about how we could engage with the nonprofit sector to support students who are in danger of being truant or who have excessive absences. And maybe they have some reasons that they're not coming to school that the school is not necessarily equipped to meet or provide, but there are organizations in the community or in the state who would be willing to come alongside the school and offer those supports that might get the child back into school. But how does the school know who's willing to help support them in those ways? And then that's truancy. And then what if it's literacy? How can the school be made aware of some resources and some organizations that are willing to provide parent support? And so I think it's going to look different depending on what the problem is that they're trying to solve, because not everyone's going to be engaged in the same way. But you could have different ones that are willing to come alongside and help in their area of expertise or in some, initiative that their organization is pursuing.
Yeah, I agree. I think public-private, I think with career opportunities, obviously with work-based learning. But I think it's just going to look different in that local area. It's, what are the needs that school has? Maybe they have maybe it's a type of fundraising need. Maybe it's volunteers at the school. Maybe it's sponsoring some parent nights. I think it'll depend on what that school needs, and also what that business or what that nonprofit organization, how they're looking to get involved and what's beneficial to them as well.
That we have struggled in that two-way communication. And I know that repository, at least in the Baton Rouge area, and I'm blanking on the name, but that has already been established. And I think that formerly Lano was working on that as well. And so I do think that would be helpful. But the key piece is that communication, that open doorway from the schools, and just encouraging schools to engage in those partnerships.
Did you say already has something like that established? Yeah. Any other comments or questions or suggestions based on partnerships and collaborations? Okay. So now moving to the second bucket, communication, clarity, and access. These recommendations focus on ensuring the state system and school information and support are understandable, accessible, and responsive to the needs of families. So we have 6 of these guys. So A here is create resources and communication structures, including for early childhood. That was an area that really came up a good bit. For ease in family access and navigation, that promote family engagement campaigns, aligned with key academic priorities such as literacy, math, and attendance, provide resources that are more accessible for families, including digital and non-digital formats for families without broadband access, and translation of communication and materials into languages other than English. Develop a parent-facing toolkit aligned with student milestones by age or grade level, and including clear guidance on high school options, including IGP meetings, dual enrollment, graduation pathways, course choice, and graduation planning. help families understand who to go to for help at the school, district, and state levels, encourage school systems to offer in-person and virtual family engagement nights focused on high school and post-secondary planning, and then use multiple outreach methods, whether in person, digital, print, social media, as some different options there. Any questions, comments, suggestions on the communication, clarity, and access bucket? Right. Yeah.
There are a couple of school districts too who have reorganized their websites and they're tracking responses to inquiries. And so I've heard it from at least two school districts that I thought did such a great job with reorganizing their websites. And whenever they had a parent inquiry that went to, one person in the district, it also sent a notification to that person's supervisor. And then if a response hadn't been logged within so many days, then it would like bump that for attention. I thought that was such a good idea, even for when you've got a situation where somebody's out or they're sick and so they're not responding. You can let somebody a level up know that this issue needs to be responded to, or maybe it got routed to the wrong department because the parent wasn't sure who they needed to ask. In that way, if there hadn't been a response by whatever time, that could alert somebody, hey, maybe this just needs to get redirected. Because I don't know, but I'll find out, or I don't know, but I'll connect you to the right person. Like, that's an okay response, but you need some response.
Informative.
And
I agree with all of that. In terms of access, what I have asked over the years that has not been able to be done is that the buses could run on maybe a Saturday to bring parents to meetings where you could have a presentation from a C3, from your state engagement, from your businesses, because a lot of parents don't have the transportation. And then they could see the route their children take to school, and they could actually attend, because that's a big issue I know here in EBR, is just having a means to get to the school. I mean, I've experienced it over a decade with parents.
Ted, another thing, after the recommendations are made, I think we also need to have some follow-up conversations around which things here need to be elevated to the statewide family engagement framework, because we work with schools and districts from about central Louisiana all the way down to South Louisiana, and there is a lack of consistency. So the quality that you might get in one school is different from what you get in another school. What family engagement looks like in one part of the state looks different in another part. So there's some of these things that are included in the recommendations that really need to be elevated to the family engagement framework, so that when schools are working on those family engagement plans, these things are considered and they actually are planned for. I understand how we're pushing a lot of the family engagement responsibilities into the individual departments, but the reality is those departments have so many other competing priorities that oftentimes that family engagement lens is kind of lost, because they're just focusing on keeping up with the day-to-day mandates that come up. So I think if we
after making these recommendations, look at which things can be elevated to that family engagement framework, it'll give us an opportunity to have a better impact.
Ted, I guess to elaborate on a point that Caroline was making and that I made earlier, we have a lot of great things here that no one, again, I understand the need to stay high level in a statewide strategy, but also I can also totally see this as being, oh, well, somebody should do this. And hopefully one day someone will actually decide who's going to do these things and actually put it into action. I keep going back to the importance of the school leader who really sets the tone and enforces an expectation across the campus and establishes as part of that school culture that meaningful, intentional communication with parents and families is what we do. With technology, there are a lot of great ways for families to stay in contact with their teacher at any moment in time, to go on an app or a website and see what homework has been assigned, what quizzes are coming up, what should my child be doing right now, access their grades. That's wonderful, but we can all of us who are parents can probably tell the story of one or two teachers who just refuse to use the system. And it is incredibly frustrating. Or maybe these teachers are using the system that is supposedly the designated one, but you've got one over here using Teams, or you've got one over here using something else. What do parents do? They get very frustrated and they just say, forget it. I'm not dealing with 4 different logins. I'm not trying to keep up with, this teacher who just refuses to use technology and is going to write things on the board. And what happens if my kid doesn't write what's on the board? And really the principal is the one who is responsible for ensuring that this is happening. And so, again, I know you're trying not to get into too much detail here, but I think somewhere in number 2, we need to say, if communication with families is important, then it starts with the school leader. And school systems should ensure that school leaders are setting the tone, setting the expectation, making this a priority in their school culture. And we have to embed that in our development of principals as well, from the time that we train principals to be principals, to the PD that we offer ongoing with them, to partnering with the Louisiana Association of Principals and others to say it starts with the school leader.
Almost as an additional recommendation somewhere, and maybe that's around support and capacity building around.
Maybe it could
Principal
be a
training.
letter G under this one to say all of these things will be achieved best if led by the school leader. I mean, I really feel like these things can't happen if we just expect teachers on their own to do these things. The principal has to create those systems and set the expectations and then monitor to make sure that it's being done and intervene if it's not.
I would add that and suggest that it just go in the introductory paragraph for point 2.
Yeah.
I also would like,
I think we need to also put some thought into how we add that initial statement, though, because some of these things are not going to be directly under the purview of the school leader. It's going to be under the purview of the district, creating a culture in which the school leader can actually take these actions. So it is kind of a combination of things.
I think the school leader aspect would best fit under support and capacity building, because we're also building the capacity for the leaders to build that climate and that culture in the community within their schools, where the expectation is that parents have an open door policy and that the parents are also being accountable for stepping in and doing their part. There are a lot of pieces here that are falling on the teachers' backs. I would like to see more accountability on the parents and how we're opening this door, but like we said in our classrooms, you could lead a horse to water. How do we bring them in more? Of course, we have family engagement strategies and teacher preparation programs and whatnot, but how do you really grasp that? How do you really pull them in? And that is a big part of the school leaders, shift there. So I would personally think that support and capacity building would be the best spot for that.
Would it be, so looking at that, I see like we called out frontline staff, school staff. I don't know if it's appropriate. Maybe it's an odd pairing. Yes.
So I also wanted to add that we recently revised our educator evaluation system. This is the first full year of implementation. And there's also an updated school leader evaluation rubric, and we updated the competencies for school leaders that those school leader preparation programs will be required to educate potential school leaders about before they get those leadership roles in the school. And so we have two different domains within that rubric that I think are applicable. One is there's a domain specifically for community engagement. And so standard leadership expectations would be develop productive relationships with stakeholders, use communication to enhance student learning, build support for goals. I'm just skimming, I don't want to read all of them to you. Create opportunities for stakeholder engagement to support student learning. And then there's another domain for responsiveness to stakeholders. And those like standard expectations include create organizational structures at the school that empower all students and parents across communities. So we have some things in there that will now be part of the standard expectations for school leaders. And so every year they'll get evaluated according to that rubric. They'll get a professional growth plan that if this is an area of weakness for them, they'll get some support from their supervisors on how to improve their performance in those areas. So I do like the way we've intentionally built in that community engagement and that family engagement in those two different domains of the rubric.
That's used by all public schools.
So it's this is the first full year of implementation. Our charters and then districts can propose an alternate rubric. They can submit that to our team, and the team can evaluate it for comparability to what's required. But we have most of the school districts have transitioned to this one. We had many participate in the learning year last year, and then this year is that full first year of implementation.
So again, I'm sorry. So you said that districts can opt out of it and charters aren't required to use it. Is that?
They can propose an alternative rubric, and then our team will evaluate that to see if it's comparable to what this is. So it's not just they cannot do it. They could propose an alternative. So for example, let's say you have a district who, instead of using the Louisiana Educator rubric, they'd rather use the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching rubric. They can propose that to our team. They'll review and say, you know what, this is really comparable in these areas, these ways, approve. So there's an approval process for that. It's not an opt-out though.
Any other comment? I didn't know if we wanted to add. Go ahead, Mr. Fulton.
I just want to say we keep talking about engagement and we use examples. I live in the northern tundra, okay? There are a lot of small rural communities and the access, the availability. So we need to keep a comprehensive look at the state overall, because I don't want certain areas to be left out.
I think that too, I get kind of speaks a little bit to F, even though it's not spelled out exactly, but just making sure that multiple outreach methods are used. And then it goes back to I think a point that Dr. Bentley was making about it's not in communications, it's not enough just to send the thing out. It's like, did the thing accomplish what it was supposed to do? Again, that is a big challenge is meeting, one, just getting the message to the parents and all the different, getting the message to them, period, but then thinking through all the different, rural, urban, and maybe they speak a different language, and then getting them to also care and engage with it and take that action. Any any other, and I don't know if, what Ms. Townsend mentioned about about the school leaders kind of met that ask. I mean, under support and capacity building, yeah, we have something specific to frontline staff. We could even expand this if we, I think frontline staff, very important. That's often the first person a family sees. Maybe we include something there about the school leader, or maybe we expand and have an E in that one for school leaders.
On B, would it be possible to add school leaders and educators?
Yes. Mhm.
I mean, I think I could read that either way. Some people might assume that that's just classroom educators, but I think it's very important for school leaders to be included in that as well, just to be specific.
I agree, and I would add it as an E, because you don't want to have the same professional development for the school leader as you do the educator, because they have two different tasks to support and capacity building, or family engagement.
So we'll do a different, I'll do it I'll make that the new B, and then we'll make B the new C, and then we'll just kind of move everything down.
I have a technical request. Strategies, Dr. Karen Mapp will tell you out of Harvard, all of her deep research on family engagement, is that family engagement is not a strategy. It's a process. And so if we can find an alternate for the word strategies in both of those recommendations, best practice, process, philosophy, that will drive home moving from that involvement mindset to true engagement.
Would the recommendation there be process, or?
Yeah, well, in B,
that would be the best?
B as it exists right now, best practices would fit better there.
Okay. Maybe C, best practice. B, do process.
B, best practice. C, process.
So we kind of unofficially shifted to 3. Any other 2 comments on communication, clarity, and access? We'll go to 3. And then Ms. Smith, I see your cards. We'll do public comment on this since it's one agenda item at the end of this agenda item. So 3, yes, Mr. Morris.
Hi, everybody. I'm from the Department of Health. I've been here throughout the year, and I really feel in some ways out of my element. I don't have children in the school system in the state, but I've been thinking about something throughout the comments today and just wanted to share for whatever it's worth, right? In the Department of Health, we're thinking about engagement and at all levels, right? So at the individual doctor-patient level, at an individual clinic or hospital level, how is that clinic, hospital engaging with the community of patients around them? At a large, like, managed care organization, you think about Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, something like that. How are they communicating with the community of their patients and the community of the doctors and nurses and healthcare providers within their network? And so throughout this conversation today, I've heard like the different levels of engagement. I don't know if it's Ms. Marsh or Dr. Marsh, you mentioned just quickly the difference between parent involvement versus parent engagement. And I don't know what that difference is. I heard it and I processed it as parent involvement being involved in the education of the child and that child's kind of educational development versus like engagement in how they're being educated or engagement in the school system. So I don't know if you would want to speak more about that.
So a lot of the conversations that we're having right now are kind of focused on parent involvement. When you think about parent involvement, you are not actually asking parents what they need. You're just making an assumption and you're giving them things. Whereas when we talk about parent and family engagement, it's a reciprocal relationship. We are asking parents what they need, we're telling them what we need, and we are collaborating together to make decisions that are going to be within the best interest of children. So that's the difference. Involvement is just telling them, come pick up a report card, come to this meeting, come do this, come do that. Whereas engagement is saying, okay, well, what are some things that you're struggling with? What are some things that we could provide you to help you better support your kid at home? What are the reasons that are that's keeping you from getting your kid to school? How can we support you in that? And then making sure that parents are educated on some of the things that we talked about around graduation requirements, diploma options, so that they can make informed decisions and collaborate with teachers and schools around those things.
And if I can offer some additional quick bites on that, I like to look at it as involvement is surface level and engagement is a deeper level. And in that engagement realm, not only are you co-collaborating, co-creating, decision-making is done in a collaborative way. Involvement is one-sided where you provide all the information. Engagement is where you take that information and implement it in a way where those families are deeply engaged. So one of the good examples is DIBELS. So if your child takes the DIBEL assessment, the law states that you need to be informed of where your child is, so that paper can be sent home. Engagement will require you to go a step beyond that and perhaps tell families what DIBELS is, what it means, how to read their test scores, and not just send the paper home. And then a step going beyond that is to bring them in to talk about ways that they can support their kids through, preparation or beyond that DIBELS assessment. And so we look at it as surface or deep level work.
Thank you. That's not really the way I heard it, so thanks for that. I guess the thing that I was trying to share is that in each of these recommendations or focus areas, there seems to be a level of encouraging parents to be involved in their child's kind of education and learning process. And then there's another level, which is like the collective engagement of the community of parents, right? Which is listening to parents, which is why I shared with you like the school climate survey, because schools are not only, they are first and foremost a place of learning, but they're also a massive social environment that impacts the health and overall well-being and mental health and social development of children. And these school climate surveys thinking about, we're talking about truancy, but thinking just about mental health, thinking about nutrition, thinking about other things, social development. We haven't spoken a lot about that. And I just feel like there's a space under each of these focus areas to think about, as you were asking, like, who's responsible? Is this, the individual teacher and parent relationship? Is it the school system? Is it the district? And maybe there's some way of putting these recommendations into categories, maybe that might clarify not only who's responsible, but also is it like to involve the parent or is it to engage the parent? There's something.
We do have in 4, getting into Elevate Family Voice, where we do have some around surveying parents or, making sure they are involved, opportunities for them to be involved in different groups. So we do have some of that. Haven't got to 4 yet, but we do have some of that there as well.
I just want to say, I know we have not gotten to 4 yet, but that is really where the engagement piece lives. And in order to have that engagement piece live at all, you have to have all these other pieces fall into place. You have to have the partnerships and collaboration. You have to have the capacity building and whatnot. Perhaps we would need to shift the Elevate Family Voice to as like our overall, this is the umbrella. This is what we want to have happen. And how do we make that happen? And then we have our pieces where we have the involvement pieces. When I spoke earlier about where's the parents' accountability come in, for lack of better words, that's what I was trying to say. Where's the actual engagement? Where the caregivers actually coming into being a part of it. So just to keep that in mind, that we potentially might need to shift some of these things around.
Or maybe move it up to 1 if we want to make sure that is something people see initially. Dr. Bentley?
I definitely agree, and I've kind of been on the warpath lately on this issue, even with some other groups that we work with in state and out of state. We talk about parental rights and we talk about school choice and a lot of these issues. But I also come back to, we don't talk enough about parental responsibility. Accountability, responsibility is the word that I've chosen to use lately, because parents, these are your children. And I feel like, sometimes that just needs to be said. I believe that we have spent so much time putting so much into schools that at times it can feel like, parents, don't worry. We got you. We have programs for everything under the sun. We have asked schools to be everything to your kids. Instead of starting with, parents, these are your children. We are here as partners to support their education and development. Here are the things that we are going to expect of you as a parent. And in return, here are the things that we commit to do alongside you if we can better understand what your needs are. And if we can do that, we can achieve some really amazing things for your kids. But a lot of times that initial conversation doesn't happen. And so I agree. I think elevating that and just making that a central piece of this is really important.
I just have to say thank you for those comments, because a lot of frustration I have is, the constant burden that a lot of our schools carry when there are many parents who won't do their basic part in getting the children to school with some basic needs already met. And then our schools get called DNF schools, when really a lot of that belongs on the parent. At the same time, I'm going to say there are barriers that some people have to really overcome to be that kind of engaged, involved parent. And I think there's issues beyond the scope of this task force. When you talk about parents who are working 2 or 3 jobs, or don't have a vehicle to get their children to school if they miss the bus, or to come to these meetings, that's also part of it. So I agree with what you're saying about parental responsibility, but then there's also those who want to be involved and can't. So it is a pretty gargantuan task.
So I'm just, my head is in, I guess now just kind of organizing it, more of a so I was thinking of, is elevate family voice really the main thing we're trying to accomplish? And then and then in that we have the statement right now that's under that, and then something needs to go in there about kind of parents, these are parents' kids. You hear that there's the phrase, that parents, kids belong to their parents, not the government. I don't know if that's the statement we're going to use, but something.
You can actually pull language from the Children's Code. I like to quote it often.
Good.
Look at the preamble of the Children's Code, and it tells you exactly what responsibilities are of people who have children and their responsibility to bring them up, to supervise, to educate them. And it starts there. And then, I don't know that it's so much elevating family voice as much as it is being a partner. This is all about a partnership between schools and families. Schools have kids a long time out of the day. A lot of times children see their teachers and people at school longer than they see their parents. This has got to be a partnership.
And I like what Ms. Marsh said or maybe with Ms. Jackson, but about the philosophy piece. That's where we need to start, a common philosophical view of what family engagement looks like. And if that starts at the school leadership on that level, and then defining it using the Children's Code for parents, just where do we all, what's our starting point? What's our touchstone? And then where do we go from there? So on the organization piece, as you're speaking of that, Mr. Beasley, I think that should be the shift, and the idea of what family engagement and family involvement should be at the beginning.
I'll
Maybe
just add one last thing. I think then if you frame it that way, then you can very easily go into a conversation about how do we empower families to do that. They can't do it without information. They can't do it without, communication in a strong partnership with the school system. But we want parents to do these things, and they want to do these things. I think most of them do. But we're not creating the systems and the processes for them to fulfill their role as a parent in partnership with their child's school.
And that piece kind of gives them equal footing. Like this is about us together working and collaborating. Family voice, we need to elevate your family voice, because we can go all day with partnerships and collaboration. I can train my teachers all day. We can do PDs. We can put systems in place. I can have PBIS for the parents happening. But if they don't understand what their role is first and foremost, then all of that will just fall flat.
Good.
Maybe also this while I had stepped out, but is there something about letting parents know the importance of their role? Because thinking back to, we had parents tell us, no, like we feed them and make sure they have clean clothes. Y'all are in charge of everything education. Like we don't really want to hear about what you're doing in the school day. We drop them off, you educate. Like we had parents tell us that before. And so, and we had to say, no, you are important because X, Y, Z. But I wonder if maybe that would be important too, is just to let parents know why their role is important in education, like why they do have a role.
And what their role is. And that could even be, I'm just envisioning at the beginning of the school year, we have to do the modules, right? You have to do the ethics training, you have to do all these trainings, like even just quick videos where they can see how do I help my child with literacy at home, like a 2-minute video. What is truancy? What happens if my student misses 3 or more days? Just little bits and pieces here and there that they can use from our framework that we would, our toolkit that we would provide. But letting them know as one of those modules, this is why you're so important in your child's life when it comes to education, and starting there.
It would almost be kind of what's run through my head now is maybe there's this overarching, like respecting the role of the family, and then breaking, using the children's code as a guide, and then getting into it could still be the 5 recommendation areas. And instead of elevate family voice, maybe it's elevate family partnerships.
I still
Don't seem as excited about partnerships.
That's number one.
So maybe maybe these come underneath that, respecting the role.
It also goes to Marsh talking about defining what
Engagement versus involvement.
starts that we keep saying like elevate voice. That's good too. I think we could as easily say like listen.
Right. Like I think defining it, the importance of the role of the parents, the Children's Code preamble, like defining what it is, what is the vision, and then here are the steps in order to accomplish that.
I like that too, because again, we're sitting here talking about partnerships. So to define on both sides what that looks like on the school lens, but also as Dr. Bindley has said, what does that mean?
Right.
Add into the executive summary, we go into kind of this definition of involvement versus engagement, and then open up our recommendations with respect the role of the family, respect the role of family, and then go into the elevate family voice bullets, the alphabet there, and then we explain kind of in the intro there, in order to do these, to truly respect the role of the family, here are 4 areas. Here are 4 additional recommendation areas. And it's almost like they're little sub-bullets,
And we revisit
subsections.
the verbiage of
Yes.
the first
Yeah.
one. can we revisit the verbiage of that?
The respect,
I mean, of course, yes,
Yeah.
I'm all about respecting it.
yeah,
But before we can respect it, we need to have a philosophical understanding of
Yeah.
what it is that we're even looking at and trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think before we put any connotative words on it, such as respect, we need to first and foremost just outline what it is.
And I think that's where I was going, yes, because I think respecting it, I mean, you have to respect the role of the family as well as respecting the role of the school. So I don't think it's about the respecting, it's understanding the roles and responsibilities of each. I think that's the setting, the groundwork, because if neither one understands their role and responsibility or the role and responsibility of the other, then you can't work together, you can't engage, you can't support each other. So I think that's where it's.
So perhaps define or outline.
I guess the one, sorry, go ahead. The one area that gives me a little pause is like, will it then look like here's government telling parents, this is your role? It's like almost how do we soften
The
that a little
preamble
bit? It's
already
like we're
does
just
say
sharing.
that
Yeah.
it already exists. And it's not the
Yeah.
government saying that this is what it is. It's a definition that is taken from the children's code.
Yeah.
I read this, I view this as government affirming what are the rights and
There you go.
God-given responsibilities of people who have children, and what they are to do, what they should be empowered to do, how government can support them in doing the things that they are responsible to do and have the right to do. But it's also the government saying, here's how we are going to respect your rights and empower you to exercise those rights. And I think if worded in that way, it doesn't come off as, we're the government and we're going to make you do what you're supposed to do. But let's acknowledge, we have a DCFS for a reason, and they address neglect and abuse because there are cases where parents do not fulfill those responsibilities as they should. And it's a shame that, a lot of times we wait until situations are very bad and very dangerous before action is taken. On the other hand, I understand that you want to wait and not have the government rush in prematurely. That is something that we guard very carefully.
I'm thinking about the involvement versus engagement defining too. And I think the way we frame it maybe even could be in a way that involvement's not bad. Like if you're at a level 0 right now, involvement could be a necessary step on the way to engagement, but that might help frame what we're going to get into in the rest of the report with helping you understand, okay, where are you on the continuum of this? And even in our ed leader rubric, you've got different levels of proficiency with the different competencies. And so a level 1 would be the school leader ineffectively or inconsistently does this thing. On a level 3 would be the school leader usually does this thing. And then the level 5 would be the school leader always does this thing. And so, and then there are different little descriptors in each thing. But it is a continuum of improvement because very rarely are we going to get everything right the first try. But at least talking about the involvement and engagement can help to define, we understand this as a process. You think about where you are in this, and then you can identify some tangible next steps you can take to improve from wherever you are to wherever, we want to be.
Ashley, you made a point there is that involvement is not bad. And I think that's the misconception is that we don't need involvement, we need engagement. We actually need both. And you can't have engagement unless you have involvement.
Can I make one request also? Under current number 1, point D is where you mentioned PTA and PTO. I'm just wondering, or I would personally prefer that to be under the Elevate Family Voice section.
Supporting.
I'm just talking and my mic's not on. Shifting D1, 1D, to our new, maybe it's affirming the role of the family is that main heading. And it will be under the
Current
Elevate
number 4.
Family Voice, bullets. It'll be in those 4.
If we're going to shift that, because it was sort of packaged as partnership opportunities, can we leverage the existing PACs? Is PAC required? Is that a policy?
So an official parent advisory council, just in its own sense, I couldn't find a requirement for that. They're required to have that special ed parent advisory council. There's one on school health that they have to do. You should involve parents in pupil progression plan review, but I couldn't find just that standalone parent advisory council. Cheryl may have a different understanding of that, but I have seen some school districts start to do one anyway, and I think that might be a nice recommendation,
Yeah.
is that maybe they start to do
So
that.
they can roll that. We can, if it's okay, replace that with leveraging parent advisory councils at the school level.
And at least at the district level too, if that's, if it's hard logistically to do one at each school.
Well, that's the closest
could
to
start.
the student. I tell you, I was on.
Back to leadership that's been discussed, those councils, whatever groups you call them, they're only as good as how bought into they are by the leader and that sort of thing. So we can create all of those and recommend them, but what somebody said, I don't see harm in putting it there, but we keep talking about forming those types of groups, and I am not convinced that they are being highly functioning quality.
And it's a part of the infrastructure issue. Like, you can have all these pieces, but if we don't put them together and really build this strong picture of it, and I can tell you the power of a collective voice goes further than the voice of one. And we've seen it on CX. And that's why those were required to be created. So if you take that, and we often talk about the most engaged parents are your special education parents. And so we know how to elevate voices, and there are mechanisms around supporting students with and families with special needs. And I often say that doesn't mean that parents that don't have students with special needs don't need their voices elevated too. But they don't have an avenue. They don't have a vessel for that. So that's where PACs can envelop all those voices. And so I hear you and understand definitely that if there's no infrastructure or no buy-in to the leadership to utilize those groups in an effective way, then it goes for nothing. But if the infrastructure is built and the recommendations are built in such a way that they are allowed to use that voice or allowed to create those, then it makes a world of a difference. And I still say that it's needed at the school level, not at the district level, because we keep getting further removed from the student, and the climate and culture starts at the school. Just like you said, the best relationship is with the teacher. So whoever's closest to the student is where we'll get the best engagement.
I'm curious, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
I'm curious, my thought, how many, just random, but do most parents, like my son's school does a parent survey, and then they report out on the findings of that survey. I'm just curious, thinking about a group of parents working together, fine, but I'm just curious how many practice that survey to drive that. I'm just curious.
I don't know if I can say an exact number, but I do know that several do parent surveys to try to ascertain if there are issues that they need to address. I used to do a parent survey at the high schools to try to change the mindset at the high schools and have more parents involved in what their children were doing at the high school.
Suggested best practice of parent, maybe even student surveys.
And to also answer your question, Caroline, not all school districts actually have funding for it. So we do it for several school districts through the Louisiana Statewide Family Engagement Center. So we go in and we conduct focus groups for them, as well as survey the families for them. And then our researcher compiles that information and reports it back to the district.
But all this is ultimately wasted effort, okay? As someone who's been on district meetings and, survey this, if there's not action taken, if there's not a response from leadership, okay, we've heard about your confusion concerning third grade reading scores and how those are assessed and who will be held back. Sorry, my microphone's tired of me talking. I'm sorry. So, the microphone, I wore the microphone out. I'm sorry. The frustration comes from, I'm a person who likes an action plan. So, I'm hearing so many fabulous ideas that have me excited. How can we build parent organizations at schools that lack them? Yay. But without implementation, like if we take a survey and it's like, why does the school have XYZ? And then we don't hear back. This is why we do this for or to your children. Or we're going to consider this and maybe tweak it a little bit. Also, I really appreciate the points that we put so much on teachers. The student-teacher ratios are very high in this state, in the public arena. And assigning them more tasks seems punitive. So
I'll just say, I understand the tension of not wanting to add to the mandates. On the other hand, I can totally make a case for why this one is just a no-brainer, because you cannot do your job and be an effective school leader if you do not have effective communication and engagement with the families of your children, period. And so you can't have an effective process like this unless the school leader is involved. The best parent organization, whether it's called a PAC or a PTA or PTO or whatever, has the school leader invested in that process. Is it a suck of time? Yes. But is it effective if you use it more for just who's going to do what during Teacher Appreciation Week? Or who's going to come and volunteer from time to time, which is usually how these groups play out. That's how they're used. But when you have the school leader coming in saying, you know what? Here's what I have been charged with doing for your children as a school leader in this school system. Here are the academic goals that I am trying to achieve. How are we going to work together? Me as a school leader and my team of educators, plus you as families who can reinforce and support all of this at home. That's what these organizations are intended to accomplish. That's where the power lies in what they can accomplish. But if it's just treated as just, oh, let's just go to parents when we need to raise some money, or let's just go to them when we need to stock the teacher lounge for Teacher Appreciation Week, of course parents disengage. They feel like, you really don't want my input. You really don't want to be a partner with me. You're just going to call me when you need my help. And so we have to be real about what we're talking about here. What's the North Star? The North Star is kids getting great educational outcomes. That is the only reason to do this. The other things are important, and I'm sure, they make people feel really good about the work. But if we're not connecting the job that we expect that school leader to do academically with this work, then we're missing the whole thing.
I was going to say a couple of things, that first of all, surveys typically are only answered by those who are engaged one way or the other, those who are positively engaged or those who are very disenfranchised. Those are the ones who feel like those who are going to answer your survey. So that's my problem with surveys. But when we were talking,
yes.
But I'm just saying the surveys are not going, I don't see them as improving parent engagement, because those who are surveyed are the ones who are already engaged or who are going to answer your survey and provide your feedback. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was as far as adding something else, because of course, we all hear how much we already do. We do have the advisory council for speds at the school level. We also have some discipline review committees that are required. But maybe that one, because it's specifically on discipline, but maybe looking at that one and making it more than just because the discipline issue usually becomes from a student whose parents aren't engaged or not engaged properly, So maybe that is the one to look at. So just instead of adding something additional.
So maybe a recommendation could be that schools incorporate like parent engagement topics and voice into their discipline advisory council that they're already required to have.
Well, I'm just saying, instead of calling it the
A separate
discipline
thing.
advisory council, maybe it includes discipline in it, but it's broader and includes parent engagement too.
I would
Yeah,
agree
cool.
with that. Let the record reflect Aaron and LSBA are on the same page of this. If we do family engagement well, we will significantly decrease our disciplinary issues.
And I like the idea of the district modeling. We're listening to parent voice. We want, families to be engaged. And then if I'm a school leader and I want my evaluation score to improve, I'm going to intentionally create, what was the thing, structures that engage family. I'm going to end up saying, oh, let me do this thing the district is modeling for me at my own school. The district is showing me it's okay to listen to parents and families. So let me go ahead and do that now, if for no other reason to increase scores. But hopefully at that point, they've seen a way to do that authentically and to listen and engage with families. And then at that point too, if you have a school leader who's maybe very new or they're struggling with academic outcomes, their supervisor may say, look, we want you to prioritize, literacy, whatever the other thing is. But then when it gets to the point that that school leader is ready to take on that new thing or engage that structure in that different way, it's something that they can do without compromising the attention that they need to pay to making sure that the children are getting what they need, that the teachers can, provide the instructional support that they need.
I would suggest that under communication, clarity, and access, that we are very specific in calling out infrastructure and frameworks of positive or effective PTOs and PACs, or whatever we want to call it. Because we have our North Star, we have our definitions, and then here are the pieces of how to become involved, because involvement will equal more engagement. And I think that we're kind of under that umbrella of engagement as our North Star. So if maybe we wanted to add another letter, or if we wanted to be more specific in maybe letter A, or just I've heard a lot of great suggestions
Just
about
parent organization. Yeah,
what it could be.
I
I'm
didn't know
on
if
number.
that was
I'm on
in
number.
addition to 1D possibly,
Okay.
where we have now engaged with existing parent organizations, such as maybe we add an addition there.
Well, I was looking at number 2, letter A, because it's create resources and communication structures, just to be more specific in what resources and communication structures that we could directly provide, such as a framework or infrastructure for an effective PTO.
So almost add that as an option in here, into A.
We have literacy, math, and attendance as priorities, but what about just the creation of an effective PTO in general? Right.
So you're saying add into A something like literacy, math, and attendance, but something also about best practices. It almost sounds like even like best, maybe logistical. It's more on the structure end for parent organizations.
Correct. It could be, like a model that a school system could use, or a school itself, in order to create an effective PTA.
That's what I was going to say, is that there are models that exist within the state where they have really great parent advisory councils or PTOs. So instead of recreating the wheel, just look at what exists. I serve on 2 right now for my children at the high school level and the middle school level, and they do a really great job of, first you have to apply to be a part of it. There's agendas that they follow, so it's not just sort of a free-for-all
parents that are disgruntled or whatever can come in and it ends up being a complaining session. It actually has an agenda where parents are voting on certain activities at the school. So I think there are models that exist that.
Right. And the more models you have, the more you can support
More flexibility.
rural and what did Mr. Falk say? He lived in the tundra.
Yes.
What was it? The northern tundra. So maybe they don't have the access, or they aren't able to, maybe they're working and they aren't able to do that, and they have a communication platform that's different.
We will add that to 2A, and then also on the parent organizations, I want to make sure I heard that correctly. So right now, kind of where we had that before was 4A, integrate family perspectives into local planning and governance at the school, system, and state level through membership and improvement teams and advisory bodies. So basically this was, either you can create your own, you can create a standalone parent group, or integrate parents into groups you have now, make sure there are parent seats there. And this needs to speak more directly to developing a specific parent group.
Not
A
necessarily.
parent count.
So if we're talking about the toolkit or the information being for parents to learn how to establish a PTA, PTO, it would go under focus area 2. But if we're talking about it from a school leader perspective and providing them with information and resources, how to create a strong PTA, PTO, wouldn't that go under focus area 3, where we talk about support and capacity building?
Because it's twofold. It's a collaboration. And also, I don't know if we need to really change any of
And then we do have
the
also,
line numbers under Elevate Family Voice. I think that those should.
and we do have also in 3B, we have, promoting models of success through statewide platforms and professional networks, which kind of speaks to a little bit what we talked about earlier, but could also speak as well to successful parent groups. Like if that was something our PTO wanted to say, we want to spotlight schools and systems really knocking it out of the park with PTO, that kind of leverages that a little bit. Mr. Morrison.
To say again that I was on the same page with Ashley when she was kind of thinking out loud about the continuum of involvement to engagement being a kind of, I visualize it like a left to right continuum. And I think now we're talking about the kind of the vertical categorization of at the individual parent, so involvement engagement for individual parents, families, and then involvement engagement collective for the parent body relevant to a specific school or a specific district. And so that means what I continue to hear in these discussions. So, point B, the second sentence, promote models of success through statewide platforms and professional networks. If you were going to talk about, surveys or parent-teacher organizations or other parent body organizations and how to include them, that's at the collective level. Whereas the individual mechanisms like communicating with parent-teacher one-to-one, that's at the individual parent-family level.
We'll do like a one-pager infographic. Yeah, get stuff on it. Yes, and I think too some of that in that initial point we will make about affirming the role of the parent, which we'll kind of live before here. That gives us an opportunity as well to talk about that when we'll talk about involvement versus engagement, and maybe a little bit about what that looks like at from different types of stakeholders. Yeah.
I would just say that there's a little bit of a micro level versus a macro level of parent engagement.
Yeah. And obviously, this isn't going to cover the gamut of everything, but we will get it there. We'll get it close. Okay, so I think we kind of did 4, right? 5, last one, financial and policy alignment. These recommendations seek to sustain and expand family engagement efforts by addressing policy and funding considerations. Examine how state and federal funding can support expanded family engagement. and consider family engagement in conversations regarding school choice and broader initiatives. So everything, broader initiatives. Any comments, Dr. Benderly?
I just think there's an opportunity to maybe provide some examples on A. I think that could be a lot of different things. Some of them low cost all the way to, low cost meaning, providing refreshments or printing flyers for your parent meetings versus using a really great technology system that parents can log into. I think there's a lot there, another continuum of kind of low-hanging fruit, easy things to just make sure that you're prioritizing all the way to, if you really want to do this well, here are some systems to put in place that require an investment of resources, but, can really make a difference.
Yeah, I know that makes me, in that one, I specifically think of like Title I funding. And, yeah, what's available. But if we have any state dollars, maybe there are opportunities for them through Super App each year, different initiatives that play into family engagement.
Align fully with that one probably, but my head is thinking about, say, even in my own organization, we have self-assessments, evaluations, or whatever, and I'm curious if there's any tool out there for a district like self-evaluate. I'm not making a lot of sense on their current comms, like for you to ask yourself as a district and go through a process of like, how are parents, or how do parents know about what their children are learning in class? Or I'm not being very eloquent, but again, is there some tool that some org, MAP or somebody has created that helps a district just, again, go through the process of figuring out
Caroline, that was actually my recommendation for this section along those lines is we don't discuss data in any of these. So I think a good place here would be data collection and evaluations. That's going to drive where their financial and policy alignment would be.
And also, if no one else can leave, we are at quorum right now. So we'll try to go through here pretty quick so we are able to take a vote. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for another bite at the apple on number 5. Since this is financial and policy alignment, there are some specific policies in state law that speak to giving families more choices. And I think it might be appropriate just to list out what a couple of those are. For example, there's a law about parents being able to request a transfer to another school in their district at a certain time of year. A lot of times parents don't get informed of that opportunity. We've talked to families dozens of times and they have no idea that this law or this application window exists or what the process is. Families often do not know about course choice, that there's an opportunity for their child to take courses that are not offered at their school through the supplemental course allocation course choice program. And then of course you have other types of schools, whether they're charter schools, whether they're a state funded private school program. I think, in an area where we're talking about empowering parents to carry out their responsibilities as parents, and we're trying to show them in an opportunity way, not a mandate way, that these are some ways that the state has already given you some additional options and given you additional opportunities to exercise your responsibility as parents. And there needs to be an effort to make sure that we're not just passing these laws and they sit out there. If we do nothing to tell parents that they exist, they ultimately don't get to using those for the benefit of kids.
And adding to that, there's also, just like we were talking about, individual graduation plans. Those are requirements for traditional public schools. Those are not requirements for charter schools and non-publics or these schools that are offering these other choices. So somehow or another to educate parents so that they know. So instead of,
if they're thinking that their school is failing them because they haven't heard about all of these choices, you know, one is individual graduation plans aren't a requirement in 3996B. So it's not. So that there's just this, you know, and I wasn't even going that. I'm just saying, I wasn't saying it as that way. I was saying that instead of someone assuming that their school is failing them, if there's some way that they know the differences of what their school is required to do, if they're a traditional, a charter, or a public choice, that is a way to engage. And also because even if they're not required to do it, the parent may want to request it to be done. So those are ways to engage.
So maybe something around like, because I heard something around, supporting schools but also encouraging them to actually do the communication. So something around support and encourage schools and systems to regularly communicate, policy, something with families. There's probably a word or two after policy. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not typically known as someone who advocates for increasing the budget in certain areas. On the other hand, I do think there's a specific role that the department can play here, that a lot of times we expect school systems to do, and for whatever reason, in some cases it happens well, in some cases it doesn't. But it's also an odd thing to expect school systems to talk to families about other choices outside of their school system. Can't blame them for that. The Department of Ed doesn't, to my knowledge, rarely do you get funding to support a robust communications and marketing effort to families across the state when the state passes laws to give families more choices. You're typically given a set of responsibilities as the administrative agency. Your role, either the department's role or Bessie's role, is to develop policy and implement these things. But then whose job is it, and who is given the resources to actually go around the state and tell families that this new thing exists? Obviously, that creates some pressure on groups like mine and others to kind of fill that role and to do what we can to support those efforts. But I also believe that if we're going to continue creating these things, we also need to support your ability as the State Department of Education to have the resources you need to effectively go out there and communicate directly to families across the state, no matter what type of community they live in, no matter what type of school their kids go to. And that's been a missing piece for a long time. And I hope that, you guys will also let us know how we can help to advocate to give you the resources that you need to do that effectively.
No, I appreciate you bringing that, but it's challenging to communicate with families across the entire state organically, like without funding, just because your reach is only going to be so far. So with C, or with 5, adding a C around policy communication, possibly even something around encourage funding to be included with, I don't know if it's major or new education initiatives. And there'll probably be some hedging in that language as well, just because I know funding is not widely available. Both of those sound.
As LSBA, I'd say we would disagree with that, because using that money to advertise versus in the classroom, where we're already limited in classroom dollars, I would say that's an issue. And so.
Any other comments or concerns around 5? Okay. Just quickly going over timelines and next steps. We do have a comment. I'm going to go over the timeline and then, so here we'll do the comment first, and then Ms. Smith.
Good morning. Thank you all for letting me speak. I've been sitting patiently as I've listened to all the great things that you guys had to say. I am a parent of a SPED student and a student who are attending magnet schools, and I have a kid in college now too. So I've seen the gamut as a parent, in education in EBR and in the state of Louisiana. And there are some things that I'm very concerned about. I think that when you guys talk about engagement, the centerpiece to all this is the PTO. If you would engage or make some kind of best practice or standard of having a PTO at every school in the state of Louisiana, I think that you would see more of what you're trying to accomplish here in communication, and engagement, and how to get out. You were just talking about how do we communicate that we have these new initiatives and it costs money. Social media is free. If you have PTOs in each organization at each school, then you can use that leader who's the PTO leader. There's always a parent at a school. You may not have a whole lot of parents, but you're going to have one or two that are usually very involved. I am one. I don't have a PTO at one of my kids' schools. That's the reason I came here, because I wanted to make sure I spoke about that. When we talked about, I can't go back to one. I got to say it too. So number 2, communication, clarity, and access. I recommend bullet point C be around SPED. We talk a lot about ELL learners. I know there's a new certification for ELL teachers or those who work with those kids. And when we talk about special education students, we usually will say, oh yeah, I heard someone say that SPED's parents usually are the best at advocating. That's because the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil. There is no real standard of inclusion or opportunity for us to get what we need for our kids unless we are the squeaky wheel. And so you have to find creative and alternative ways to communicate with leaders at this that are sitting at this table, and with the leadership in the school and at the district. I also think that when it comes to clarity and access, there should be a SPED school board member at every school board. We just started an ESS parent group amongst some parents from a parent advisory council, because the parent advisory council meets twice a year in our district. That is checking the box. That is not engagement. So I'm very concerned about that, and the way that we message and package these parent advisory councils is very concerning to me, because they are not providing the resources, the tools, or the outcomes that our students need, particularly in special education. I'm trying to talk really fast because we don't have 3 minutes, but I sat through all 5 of these, and I have a lot of notes. So if you would just bear with me, please. And when we also talk about accessibility, students, there is no real curriculum support kit for SPED teachers. A lot of them move over out of necessity because there aren't SPED teachers in the classroom or in the school. There's only one SPED teacher at one of my daughter's school for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. That is an atrocity. If you have 50 kids with an IEP, how is that SPED teacher expected to provide the support that is required by law in those individual education plans? You have the leadership. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but Miss Caroline, let me tell you something. When you talk about the leadership, I'm 100% on board behind that, because most schools are going to function with the shadow of their leadership. So it's a top down. If you have leaders who are bought in and supporting whatever. So Title I funds, when you get, for parent engagement, those leaders are going to take the money and do whatever they want to do with it. And you hear about it, oh, okay, on a parent night, here's what we're doing. We took the money and we bought a new sign for outside, but you need intervention and support for children who are now, since 3rd grade is a retention grade now, this law is kicked in. Why don't we have intervention and support? Oh, we don't have resources for that. Well, why didn't you take that money instead of buying this board or doing this other harebrained thing, moronic thing? Use that money for what is actually needed in the school, and the school survey is not going to turn that out, but it's not going to show that. But if you had a PTO that was actually engaged, as I've heard Dr. Bentley say, in more than just providing snacks and PBIS opportunities and things like that.
You can go ahead. where I
All right,
I
okay,
gave you
sorry,
five.
there was
So
there was
concluding.
5 things, okay. Let me go to support and capacity building. I think that PTO should be, a part of every section that you have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because it speaks to engagement across each of these areas, particularly support and capacity building. Because if you had a PTO that could partner with the leadership that, oh, we're short of teachers. Well, as a parent, I don't mind coming in and support, answering the phone and making sure that somebody who's an educator can go in the classroom and help out when the teacher's not there, or you don't have, whatever you need with curriculum. Curriculum support, my sped student gets the same curriculum, the same
Ms.
books.
Smith, you can go ahead and, we got.
Can you give me like
I gave
20
you 6
seconds?
minutes. Yes, ma'am.
So my sped student, and this is very important to me, I'm sorry. She's getting the same curriculum that all regular ed kids get, and the modifications that she's supposed to be receiving, she doesn't. And this is something that I don't really get to talk about. We have modified curriculums for ELL students, but there are no modified curriculum or standards for students with special education needs with cognitive disability, impairments.
Thank you. Thank you for your. All right, so just to quickly go over timeline and next steps, today is our final meeting. The report is due to Bessie for inclusion in the Bessie agenda October 29th. That committee meetings will take place December 9th. The full board will meet the 10th. And then December 31st is a due date for submission to House Education. I wanted to see if I could get a motion to endorse the report incorporating revisions presented by the task force.
Ted, 1 second before you
Yeah.
take that recommendation. The one missing piece in the conclusion was the request to continue the task force. So I wasn't sure if that was inadvertently left out.
Yeah, well, just because the resolution itself just tasked us with submitting the report here.
Right.
And then concluding the task force. So that's not something that the LDOE was just charged with administering the actual, that resolution as it was written.
Right. And I understand the charge for that.
Yeah.
For the, 1-year task force to conclude. But as a part of our collective recommendation around our work was to continue the work. So if we're
That
going,
looks like, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So, lots of task force.
Yeah.
Lots of time. What's your vision for an ongoing, like, if this was to come up with some of the best practices and that sort of thing?
One of the things that we didn't do was dig into any data. Like, we didn't review any of that information in terms of like what the implementation looks like. So that's one of the areas. But also in building the recommendations, following up on what those what the rollout was. So, like on the Literacy Commission, we put forth the recommendations and then we follow those recommendations in terms of the implementation. So that's something that we were interested in. And then the research piece wasn't, that was done outside of this, the collective conversation. So it could look like that. It could look like a number of ways, but if it's not charged to the task force to continue, then I think the task force needs to put something in place to have some kind of monitoring request from the department so that this work just doesn't die with.
Maybe it should include a recommendation that there is some collection of data at some level versus a task force doing it.
Yeah, and I know too, with that ask about continuing it with parent involvement, that was so looking at what was focus area for the Elevate Family Voice was integrating family perspectives, whether at school, district, or state, through membership and involvement teams, advisory bodies. So, if there are any of the current advisory groups that want to take that up and include parent members that don't already have it. But I know as a department, we were tasked with this for a set amount of time. So that wasn't a recommendation we were going to make to continue this specific task force.
Ted, may I?
Yes.
Just wanted to, as far as endorsing the recommendations, I just want to say that I do I agree with all the ones except for the adding additional funds to advertise choice, because, so just putting that out there.
Legislative recommendations, there is number 3, that's explore any other considerations, so could fall under.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's why kind of leaving some of these a little more open to where if there was a lawmaker or someone that wanted to leverage that to start another task force or some other type of council, it would allow them to do that.
I think Kathy's going to take that up too. Thank you. I move to accept.
I'm sorry, could I add one thing?
Yes.
And I'm short on time too. But the idea of having some way that the school employees who handle family engagement or parent educator, whatever it might be, have a way of communicating with each other. Like the ones that I've spoken to are on an island. They have no idea what the others are doing. They have no way of supporting each other. Something to that effect.
Yeah, I know. Okay, that we do have some around communication that would again would be able to kind of leverage that. But if there was something, a specific item you wanted to recommend. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's fine.
Can we add a piece where there's a follow-up action plan to all these recommendations? Where we meet and see how are they going to be implemented? Is that?
But that's not it's not a charge of the resolution that they be implemented. The charge was that ideas be presented, correct?
Well, and this is more of an advisory body. Nothing in here requires anything. We don't have that authority.
Yeah.
In order to make any of these things happen, a law or a regulation would have to be passed. And I just want to make sure that I know we're all very passionate about these things. We believe in them. And as parents, we want to see this happen for our kids and our communities. But, this is a process, and I want to be cautious about us understanding our role in this and also understanding the real practical implications on the department, who every year they probably get a dozen of these things to run and never get additional resources or staff to do this. And we have seen some of these over the years where task forces just continue to meet and continue to meet and continue to meet. And it's just a group of people who keep talking, and you have to, I think we all have the ability and the responsibility to make sure that at the conclusion of this, we work through our respective organizations to try to put some of these things into action, because that's where we're going to see results.
Well, and to Ms. Jackson's point about Rep. Evans, I think ultimately how the process works is someone does the resolution, they ask for the report, and then that's when legislators start culling through those reports and finding their legislative ideas that can become mandates, something being implemented.
But
like the SPED advisory councils, I think it came from a report that ultimately then showed up as a mandate.
I want to ask, and I'll just read the last part of the resolution 239 from 2024 was just that the task force shall submit a written report of its findings and recommendations to Bessie and the House Committee on Education not later than December 31st, 2025, upon which date the task force terminates. And so the requirement was for us to submit findings and recommendations, which.
Yeah. And I think, and I know, again, I speak from LDOE's perspective, there are definitely recommendations in here we want to act on. Mr. Wilmer, you put in the comment card. I do need to hold you to 3 minutes, though, because we do have some members that have a hard stop. Be able to.
So what I wanted to state was I sat on the House side and on the Senate side, and I was advocating for families helping families to get refunded. The House gave us $250,000, but we were still $250,000 short. There was a fund that the state was putting money in every year, but was not being accessed but by one group of people. So Families Helping Families got refunded. So when you said about money not being available, there's always money available. It's just that someone has to be able to let it be known that it's available. Also, too, I sat in a group where $10 billion was funded to a committee to do a finding. And at the 20-year ending, they wanted the money to be spoke how it was spent. And it was written in the bill. But yet when it got to the 19th year, a congressman got up and spoke and asked where would the money go. And one of the people that was in the committee said, well, we had people checking on it periodically during the year, but yet there was nothing to show where the $10 billion went. And this happened in Louisiana. So we need accountability. So you're, like someone said, we forming all these committees and everybody's doing their part. Yet at the end of the session of whatever money is being allocated, someone needs to find out where the money went because it's our tax dollars that are being spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, you endorsed. If we can get a second.
A second.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. We have a recommended report. So we will submit it to Bessie. Thank you. I will watch this meeting again and look at my notes and synthesize everything and share that with the group. But thank you so much for your time and your patience and your thoughts for this. And
With us, and
this was my first one.
together.
I will always remember you guys. So thank you. Meeting adjourned.